Hello, Sandro here with RealMediaCoach.com, and I just wanted to invite you to connect with me on all of my social media sites and to check out my website, RealMediaCoach.com. Now, I've been making soap for a few years now, and been getting a lot of questions from friends and family about how I make my soap, so I decided to make a quick tutorial video on how to do that. So let's make some soap. Okay, so here we are in my kitchen, and the first thing you need to do is just get everything that you need. Get all your ingredients out, get your soap mold, get your freezer paper, get your stick blender, get your lye, your sodium hydroxide. Just get everything you need all in one place, because kind of once you start this process, you're gonna have to keep moving. You can't really stop and run to the cupboard and grab something. So you want to make sure you have everything handy. You have your recipe sheet, your recipe sheet, and your scale and your safety equipment. So first thing that I do is line my mold. These molds I made myself. They are 12 inches long and hold about a 3 to 3.5 pound batch of soap. And so I got some scissors, some painter's tape, and some freezer paper. Make sure it's freezer paper, not wax paper. This works best for lining molds. There's two sides. There's a matte side and a shiny glossy side that's sort of waxy. You want to make sure the waxy side is exposed. That's what you're going to want to have your mold be poured into so that it doesn't stick. So I sort of fold mine into a little cavity, and I stick it in my mold, cut the corners, fold it down, trim the excess, and tape down the edges. So you can see here once I'm done, it's got a nice lined mold that I can pour my soap into, and it spreads out here nicely. You just want to make sure your corners are all sealed. If wood is exposed, it's not a big deal. It may just be a little harder to remove your loaf from the mold, but it's really not that big of a deal. But this way pretty much covers the whole mold, and it's ready to go. Okay, so now I'm going to put my safety equipment on. I got goggles and some Nitrile Gloves. I'm probably saying that wrong, but don't use latex, because some people have allergies to latex, so try not to use latex when you wear gloves. So first thing you're going to do is get a digital scale with the tare button, and what the tare does is subtract the weight of the container. So you're just weighing the material going into the container. And first thing I do is I weigh out my lye, which is sodium hydroxide, and this is the dangerous part of making soap. Most people didn't know that making soap is dangerous, but this process, this part of it is very dangerous. If you get lye on you, make sure you have some white vinegar around, because that'll stop the reaction from the sodium hydroxide. But just be really careful, make sure you don't spill it or get it on you. Next, I'm going to measure out my distilled water, and I always put mine in the fridge to get it cold, because the chemical reaction that takes place when you mix the lye with the water creates well, one, it creates fumes, so you want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. I actually mix mine on my stove top so I can turn the fan on, and also creates heat, so it can get up to 200 degrees real quick. So just make sure you keep that in mind. Make sure you use containers that are heat resistant, like Pyrex or some sort of plastic. So here we go. Here's the water that I measured out. I got this on my stove underneath my exhaust fan, just to get rid of the fumes, and I stand a little further back so I don't breathe in the fumes. And here's my lye that I weighed out. Make sure you add the lye to the water and not the water to the lye. It cannot be vice versa. It has to be lye added to the water, because when you add water to lye, it creates a huge chemical reaction and can almost explode in your face. So just make sure you keep that in mind. Add the lye to the water. I put this candy thermometer in here to try to show you guys how hot it actually gets. It got up to about 180 degrees Fahrenheit, although the camera doesn't show that very well. I apologize for that. So I just give it a few mixes, make sure all the lye is disintegrated and diluted in the water, and it'll go from cloudy to fairly clear after sitting for a few minutes. But I do this process before I measure out my oils because it takes a while for the lye to cool down. Next, I have my digital scale again. I have a little saucepan here that I'm going to melt my solid oils. So these are oils that are normally solid during room temp, and in this case I have some extra virgin organic olive oil that I'm using, and because it's fairly cold, it's in its solid state right now, so I have to measure out that and put it in a saucepan and melt it over low heat to where it becomes liquid soap, or sorry, liquid oil. So I'm just using up the rest of this container here. I got another one handy that I'm going to measure out. So I measured out the coconut oil in there, and here I have measured some organic beeswax pellets. And since those are solid, I melt those along with my coconut oil on the stove. So go ahead and just let those melt on the stove for a little while, give it a few mixes. And make sure you do this over low heat because you don't want your oils to get too hot. I try to keep my oils you know, below 120, no higher than 140. If they get that high, I'll usually put them in an ice bath or something. So I just make sure I keep it at a real low heat. It takes a little longer, but you don't want your oils to get too hot because then you'll have to bring the temperature back down. And you got a little bit of time anyways because the lye solution is still cooling. It's probably gonna take the lye solution 15-20 minutes to come down without an ice bath, so it gives you plenty of time to measure out your oils. So here I got another pitcher. I put it on my scale, hit the tare button, which subtracts the weight of the pitcher. Now I'm measuring out all of my liquid oils. And that there, I believe, was castor oil, organic castor oil. So this process is the same for all your oils. You want to measure out the amount of liquid oil. For this soap, it's calendula soap, and I have infused calendula flowers with olive oil, and that's the oil I just measured out here. And also have some regular extra virgin olive oil here. Safflower oil. I have this speeded up just because, I mean, it's the same process. You're just using your recipe sheet that tells you how much oil you need, and you're weighing out that amount of oil. And this is all done by weight, not by fluid ounces. So you need to weigh out the ounces instead of measure the ounces with a measuring cup. So what I've done off camera is I actually added the melted coconut oil and beeswax to my liquid oils. And since the liquid oils were at room temperature and the beeswax coconut oil mixture was warm, it sort of solidified a little bit here and got a little thick on me. So I put the candy thermometer in there just to see what the temperature was, and with the warm oils mixed to the cool oils, it brought the temperature to about 100 degrees, and that's sort of my optimal temperature. I want my oils to be 100 degrees or somewhere around there, and I want my light water solution to be around 100 degrees. So here I got my stick blender. I just put it in the oils, and I'm going to pour my lye solution in and mix gently without turning on the stick blender, just to avoid splashing, because again, this lye solution is some dangerous stuff. If you get it on you, it's going to hurt. So just be really careful when you're doing this part. Here we go, I got the stick blender in there. I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to mix the oils with the lye solution, and you'll see that it turns from an oily mixture to a real creamy, thick mixture. And that's soap. I mean, that is saponified oils. You see there, it turns this nice sort of golden yellow color. And what you're looking at here is essentially soap. It hasn't cured yet, but it is soap, so it's not ready to use. It needs, typically cold processed soap takes about 3 to 4 weeks to cure before you can use it. Just giving it a good mix with the stick blender, and you can see on the top of the soap, when I pull it out, you can see sort of traces that trail behind the stick blender, and that's what they call soft trace. Or if you drizzle some soap on top, you can actually see traces on the top of the soap. That is what they call trace. And at this point, I'm going to add my essential oil blend. So this is going to be a citrus calendula soap, and I got some orange and lemon essential oils that I just put in there. So you add your essential oils at soft trace. Give that a good mix with a stick blender and make sure the essential oils get mixed all the way through the soap. Give it a good mix there. This one is accelerated pretty quick. It usually takes maybe 5 minutes to get to trace, but this thing's getting thick quick, so now you got to move fast. Once it's this thick, it's a little harder to pour into your mold. So, like I said, the soap making process is not something you can stop for a few minutes and take a break. Once you start, you kind of got to finish. There you go. You can see it's way past trace now. It's taking shape real quick. So I think I got it mixed well enough with all the essential oils mixed in there to get the fragrance of those oils mixed in with the soap real well. I'm gonna move this over, grab my soap mold that I lined earlier. Make sure you line your soap mold before you make soap, because if you're stuck having to line it with your soap already hardening, you're gonna be in a tough spot. So here I go. I'm just gonna pour this out liberally into my soap mold. Try to get all that out. I don't want to waste any of this stuff because it's it's good soap there. Make sure I get every little bit. Scrape the edges of that. Okay, and then I just take my plastic spoon here and I sort of just try to agitate the soap to make sure it goes in all the corners, and give it a few taps, spread out the top, make sure it just fills out the mold, give it a few more taps. Next, what I like to do, and because of how I package my soap, I like my soap to be rectangular. I don't really make any designs on the tops of my soaps because it just makes packaging a little harder. So what I do is I take some saran wrap, just some plastic food wrap, and I pull it across the top. Just cut a piece of that there. Let it sit across the top of the soap, and then I take the lid of my soap mold and I put it on top. I loosen the edges here so that I'm able to push down, and I give it a good press, give it some pressure just to flatten out the top of that soap. And you can see there, it gives me a nice flat top surface. And that's it. I mean, that's how you make soap. You set this aside for 24 hours before you pull it out of the mold, and you can let it cure maybe another day before slicing it. I'll have more detailed instructions on how to do this on my blog, and I'll add the link to the description below. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy it.